All right, so welcome everybody to our live stream. Thanks for showing up. We're really excited to talk about the future of Apotheosis and also celebrate the holiday season with a bit of gift giving. So let's jump right into things. We just had our big update go out a couple days ago. We hope you all have been enjoying that if you've had the chance to play it so far. If not, we're really looking forward to your feedback and can't wait to see what you all think about it. So, included in our announcement for the update, we also talked about our expansion. So, to give you a sense of what the expansion area is going to look like in game, we're going to be using the Danube as essentially our boundary for where the expansion is going to be. So we're going to follow the Danube all the way up until around here, where it splits off, and then we're going to follow the Sava River, which goes till about here, and then we're going to kind of figure out a boundary that works really well for the cultures up in this area, and then we're going to top it off with just this little piece of Istria for the Liburni territory. This is a pretty big expansion for us. We're basically doubling the landmass that we have in the game currently, and we are really excited to be working in this area. It was a big conversation on the team to decide where we wanted to expand. The two natural places we were looking at was like going into the rest of Anatolia or going up into the Balkans. And what really kind of made the difference for us in coming to a decision was the announcement of the Royal Court release. And in particular, we're super excited about the cultural mixing because this part of the ancient world is incredibly fluid with all kinds of different cultures that are slamming into each other at a high velocity and coming up with really interesting cultural combinations. You have Celtic invaders that have been coming in for the last couple decades and are settling along the Danube. You have Thracians that have been here forever, and some of them are being Hellenized and some of them are not. You have the Illyrians that have been here for a long time, and they're also getting invaded by the Celts, and the southern part of Illyria is becoming Hellenized. The Paeonians are kind of holding out in the mountains, trying to figure things out. And because we're using the Danube as our natural boundary, during this time, we also know that there are some Getai who have a very complicated cultural background, and we may even sneak in some Scythians that have settled up here. But we're still doing a lot of the research part for expanding the map. Me in particular, I'm super excited to be working on the Celts. Celts is kind of my focal point. So, being able to work on the Celts in this area and over here, I'm really jazzed about. So before we move on, were there any other questions people wanted to ask about the expansion, why we're doing it, where we're going, anything of that sort? In the meantime, so with expanding into this area, we're going to have some pretty big challenges to overcome. We, starting off in kind of the Greek heartlands, we were basically flooded with information. Just hundreds of years of history, both written by the Greeks, written by the Romans, written by non-Greeks, and like their perspectives on the Greeks. So we're just a ton of information to flood the space. Now that we're moving away from the Greek heartland, we're really going to run into challenges when it comes to having primary sources to tell us what's going on in this period. So we're very likely not going to know a lot of the names for most of the rulers in this area. So all of those names are going to have to be generated by hand, and all of their kind of backgrounds and relations are all going to be basically crafted from scratch with very little information to go on. the flip side of that is that we, get to be a bit more creative. We can take some creative liberties and come up with, more interesting stories than just like, here's this person and their son, and that's just the default. We can maybe come up with some interesting stories there, in terms of the familial relations. Out of curiosity, whilst the Balkans Danube regions seems massive, I feel moving eastwards would be easier to push or to the role of court DLC, especially due to the cultural synchronism. So we definitely saw a lot of value in what the Royal Court is going to bring to the game in terms of cultural synchronicity over here. I mean, you also have Celts moving into this area. You've had a long established Persian influence, Greek influence, along with a whole bunch of Aboriginal local cultures that have been intertwining with those. So that there's definitely going to be the same impact there. What we found though was that on the team itself, we had a lot more people who were just personally really excited about moving to the Balkans. Not to say that we're not excited about moving to Turkey, but it's we're excited about moving to Turkey. We're really excited about moving to the Balkans. So when it came to personal excitement and what was gonna push us to really excel, we wanted to go with where the passion was at the time. So other challenges that we're going to have with the Balkans, we don't have a lot of written sources. Also, the archaeology is going to be a really big challenge as well. As I've been finding out through my research, is that a lot of the modern day countries in the Balkans, their archaeological programs tend to not want to talk to each other, and this is partly a result of modern political issues. But essentially, there's very few instances of kind of holistic approaches to studying this area in an archaeological context. The Bulgarians basically have their perspective on what's going on in the area. The Serbians have their perspective on what's going on in the area. And there's not as much crossover as would have been really helpful. How's the clothing situation in the mod? Do you have 3D models for the time? So currently we're using some 3D models that other modders have done for us, particularly with the helmets that came out in the last update. If I remember correctly, we don't have a quote-unquote full-time 3D artist on the team right now. So unfortunately, I think the 3D models are going to be a bit slower to catch up in terms of implementation into our mod. But it is definitely something that we're interested in. And if we can find people who want to work on the mod and do have 3D art experience, we're happy to put them to work. Because we've got plenty of stuff that can be worked on. So yeah, written sources are going to be a challenge. Archaeology is going to be a challenge. One of the other things is that, because of these different perspectives on what's going on, we're ultimately going to have to make some kind of scholarly decisions for ourselves. So, for instance, if you ask 20 ancient scholars what and where Tylos is, for those of you who don't know, Tylos is a Celtic settlement somewhere over here in the east. You'll get 20 different responses for what and where Tylos is. So at the end, we're going to have to kind of make our own decisions based on the scholarship and, just make an educated guess and roll with it. And my personal philosophy is, if I'm going to have to make a decision for two competing academic theories for how something should be set up, I'm probably going to go with the more interesting one. The one that lets us create a more interesting role, the one that lets us create or tell a more interesting story. So that's kind of what my litmus test is going to be for how we make decisions that are academically controversial or lacking any information at all. We do have a couple of characters that I am really excited to do bookmarks for. Um, so, for instance, we do know, and I'm mostly studying the Celts at this point. So all the bookmarks that like I can talk about offhand are going to be primarily Celtic characters. So if any of the other devs want to talk about other characters they want to work on, feel free to chime in. But there are three characters that I have in mind right now for bookmarks that we want to do for the expansion. One is for the leader of the Skordiskoi or Skordisi at this time. We do know that his name is Bathanatos. He essentially is a survivor from the Celtic invasion and attack on Delphi, and he basically takes a group of survivors back, settles up in the Morava River Valley up here, and then they basically form the Skordiskoi. So we do know his name. We don't know that exactly that he's alive and leading them at this time, but like we can make an educated guess since it's only a few years after the Celtic invasion south. I'm really excited to work with the Skordiskoi. They really become a powerhouse in this area. At this time, they have a really small territory that we know of, but within 100 years, they're going to have an influence that, might be as big as this range. So I'm really excited to come up with some exciting decisions and mechanics for the Skordiski and some of the other Celts that are in this area. Another bookmark character that I want to implement is a guy by the name of Komatorios. He is the leader of Tylus, like I was talking about earlier. Similarly, during the major Celtic invasion, he's going to have kind of a break-off faction that goes off and settles in this area. And he's going to form this like very aggressive kind of pirate state that is just going to bully a lot of the Greek cities along the coast. But what's interesting with them is that eventually they Hellenize a bit, and they become kind of like these protectors for these states that they had been bullying for a while, and they actually will intervene on behalf of these states. So I think there's a really interesting story that we can tell there in terms of allowing a player to transition from a predatory, hostile state to this kind of protector state that's making clients out of their local neighbors. The last bookmark character haven't fully fleshed out yet, but it's going to be Argon or Argos. I forget his ending, but he is an Illyrian king down here, and he's going to form one of the most powerful Illyrian kingdoms down here in the south. The interesting thing is he's like a young child at this point, so we might actually make the bookmark his dad, but then his dad, can do a lot to kind of set up his son for success. So we'll have to see what kind of story we wanna put there, and how we want to, give people really interesting options for this area. Those are the three bookmark characters that I'm really excited about for this area. Rick, do you have any other characters that you thought of so far that you would like to add as bookmarks?
I haven't really thought of any in particular yet. We might want to do one of the Odrysian kings, who is basically around that area right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and for them, the goals would be basically to re-establish the kingdom that they used to have before the Macedonians invaded.
Mm-hmm.
Because they basically controlled most of Thrace, most of present-day Bulgaria. But
Mm-hmm.
right now they are, after the Macedonian invasion, they have been reduced to basically only controlling the valley where you're pointing at right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for a lot of the kingdoms we're going to have in the Balkans, a lot of their decisions are going to be about like rebuilding the kingdoms of old. Like the Triboloi right now have been pretty heavily weakened by first the Macedonian invasion and then the Celtic invasion. So they'll probably get a decision to reform their kingdom. The Liburni have recently lost control of the Adriatic Sea within the last century. So I'm already working on a decision that lets them basically rebuild their kingdom. Taking the islands back, taking their colonies on Italy back. We're not going to have Italy, so that's probably something we'll add in later once we do add Italy. But they also supposedly had Kokira down here. So, and there was one other. Oh yeah, the Iopidans. Iopidans. Basically, when the Liburni lose their territory in the Adriatic, they take a bunch of coastal territory from the Iopides. So the Iopides are going to have a decision to try to get their territory back. So a lot of these territories, I think, are going to have these like kingdom rebuilding focuses. You mentioned you do Celt slightly north of the current map. Any thoughts on the Illyrians all the way up in the Balkans, or is that a no-go? When you say up in the Balkans, do you mean like up north here, like close to the Danube? Because we do know that in the previous century, the Altariatai were up in this location, and we do have the names of some Illyrian tribes up in here. I have to do a lot more research on this kind of middle zone here because we know that it's becoming very the culture is shifting to be much more Celtic focused, but the evidence that I've seen so far is pretty vague as to whether or not the Celts were actually settling, or if they were just kind of coming in, taking over the aristocracy, but they were still a minority population, or if these cultures are just adopting Celtic culture as a way to kind of assimilate to these quote-unquote very successful invaders. The present day Slovenia, Croatia, and Serbia. Yeah, so we are going to have the Illyrians up in there. We're still going to have to figure out the politics of this area because we have almost no historical records for like who's ruling what at this time. So we're just going to have to make an educated guess. All right, so we talked about bookmarks. We talked about the expansion. We talked about some decisions. One of the things that we are looking into as we go up to the north and we're dealing with more quote-unquote tribal societies, we're really unsatisfied with the way that tribal mechanics work in vanilla. So we are going to put a lot of effort into making a much more robust and exciting quote-unquote tribal mechanics to really flesh out how interesting and diverse the cultures are up here. I personally think that the tribal stuff in vanilla is pretty lackluster, and so we want to make sure that playing as one of these groups that's not a Roman and not a Greek is way more fulfilling than it would be otherwise. So we're looking at different structure types, different government types, lots of different ways to really flesh out the nuances of the cultures in these areas. And the other thing too is like we want to make sure that eventually, once we've expanded to a much larger map, that if you're playing a Thracian or Celtic tribe over here, it doesn't feel the same as playing a Celtiberian tribe over here or a Gallic tribe over here. So we want to make them feel unique and interesting to play as. Yeah, and we're super excited for the Royal Court. As we said in the update, um, we're gonna be working on the expansion content for now, and then when Royal Court arrives, we're gonna transition over to work on a compatibility patch for the mod, so that you all can play with the Royal Court content in our mod as quickly as possible. And if we have any smaller features that we've been working on that aren't directly tied to the Balkans, we'll also release that content with the Royal Court stuff. So if we do more like decisions down here, or more language translation, stuff like that, all that stuff will be released with the Royal Court update. And yeah, the Royal Court, it's going to add a lot of exciting stuff that we're super excited about. Like I already mentioned, the culture stuff is going to be great for this period. Anytime I read about any of the tribes here, they're always described as like Celto-Illyrian Dacian tribes, or Thraco-Dacian, and blah blah blah. It's always this like multicultural name. So being able to reflect that in the way that the cultures are going to look and feel in the game is really exciting. I'm also really excited for the in-court intrigue, the new items and stuff. Hopefully we can get some 3D art in, and get some ancient relics to throw in for you to show off in your court when you build that for your kingdoms. If I remember correctly, they're also adding in some kind of adventure system. So I'm really excited to see what the potential is there. One of the things that I really want to do as part of this expansion is allow for a more decentralized playstyle, especially when we're looking at a lot of these communities up here in the north, like the Illyrians and the Celts. Like, these are communities that are semi-nomadic or potentially fully nomadic, and they're very mobile. We're looking at a lot of maps where you'll have a tribe that's like listed over here, and then within 100 years it's listed over here. Like, these are communities that are moving around a lot, and we want to be able to reflect that in some way. So I'm excited to see what potential adventures have. We might come up with an entirely new system that allows you to basically be a mobile ruler, able to move around the map and conquer that way. But we'll see, what the limitations are with the mechanics, and especially with the Royal Court update. But I would love to be able to kind of recreate the possibility for you to be a ruler in a Celtic land, and then decide that, it's time to migrate, and you get all your people, you get a bunch of special units, and you decide to go settle somewhere else. It's a really big, important aspect of this time period, is that kind of large mobility of people, and being able to reproduce that would be really fun and exciting, I think. We got a couple questions. How is balancing? Will a polis always be trounced by a county or a country like Macedonia? So balancing is always going to be difficult. We so far haven't taken a big swing at modifying AI behavior in the game. So AI aggressiveness, AI tactics, AI goals typically is the same as it is in vanilla. I think we've made a couple adjustments here and there as needed. We do want to take a better approach with balance with the Balkans. How extensive that shift is going to be, we haven't fully mapped out yet, but we do want to make sure that, if we have, these new territories up here, that we're not just going to get a Macedonian empire every single game. We want to make sure that a Skordisky invasion is really threatening. We want to make sure that a reconstituted Odrysian kingdom is really threatening. And I think one of the things that we kind of lose sight on when we look back at this time period is we have we have this issue with hindsight where the Romans are always going to win. Well, not necessarily, right? Like Rome was sacked like 100, 200 years before our start date. So the idea that we have these Hellenized kingdoms that are always going to win out, I don't think is something that we necessarily want to have as something that's set in stone. I think having these non-Hellenized cultures be truly threatening presences and able to threaten these Greco-Roman powers is going to be a really important thing, and we're gonna work to make sure that that's actually viable for the mod. For example, police have better levies, more extensive revenues. So one of the things that we do have right now in terms of both balancing and trying to recreate how war was conducted this time period is, we've made purchasing mercenaries a much bigger part of the warfare. In an attempt so that if you have a small polis, like let's say you're trying to rebuild Athens, you stand a much better chance fighting against Macedonia if you're able to get yourself a bunch of mercenaries. So that's why we've added a ton of mercenaries that are purchasable. We wanted to recreate that aspect of warfare where that's what a lot of the post-Alexander kingdoms were doing, is just buying a bunch of mercenaries from whomever to try and claim whatever corner of power that they could. But we also want to give a lot of these small polises a fighting chance. One of the things we're going to have to look into, especially as we move away from these more established civilizations, is that for a lot of the cultures we have up here, like they don't have standing armies. They typically have a very small professional warrior class, and instead they get these really big levies of soldiers that are just like the common people that are poorly equipped. So what you might end up seeing with the cultures up here is that they have fewer men at arms, but way bigger levies. And trying to strike a balance between that is going to be something that we're definitely going to look into and work on. Yeah, loss of landless titles and the nomad system in CK2. We're definitely not going to model it after that. I think we're likely going to take a more customized approach because that playstyle I think is a legitimate playstyle of being nomadic, of being a landless character, especially for this time period with certain cultures. Like once we add the Scythians, like that's their bread and butter, right? Like that's who they are. We don't want them just like building up these mega cities because it would be wrong. So definitely trying to implement a robust and playable and exciting nomad playstyle is one of our goals. If we don't do it for this update, this expansion, I want to at least lay some like foundation for it so we can expand upon it later. Can you leave some trace of you being in a part of the map after migrating away, like cultural faith or whatever else? Yeah, so one of the things that mechanically we're going to have to work around is that you can't leave empty territory. Like you can't just like get up and destroy all of the holdings in this area and go move somewhere else. The game doesn't let you destroy settlements, even in like the scripting code. Like I don't even have the ability to destroy like special buildings. So one of the things that I've thought about doing, and like again, this is not fully fleshed out, is that we'll probably you'll like appoint somebody to leave behind, while you kind of get all your special troops, you get your big population, and then you move on. What I'm going to be using to try to flesh out these mechanics is that Julius Caesar actually gives a really detailed description of what the Helvetii did to prepare for their major migration to the west over here. So I'm going to be looking at that as essentially a loose model for how we want to set that up. It's probably going to be an event chain. We don't just want it to be this binary decision of, oh, well, we got up and left today. It's, you're gonna need to spend some time in it. It might be a scheme. It might be a decision event tree. How exactly we're going to implement that, we haven't fully fleshed out yet, but that's the model that I want to use. And then we're going to have to translate that into what the mechanics of the game allow us to do. Could you change them to a new custom holding type, runes or whatever? Yeah, that's something we're looking at. Changing the settlement types. I'm also flirting with the idea of having like some off-map territories that you're still like landed, quote unquote, but you're landed to these off-map territories that you can't actually interact with. We're gonna have to experiment around with what that actually allows us to do and what the limitations of doing something like that are. What's the hard limit for how far forward you're willing to push the mod's available start dates? So one of the changes that we wanted to include for this past update, but we decided that it was much bigger and we wanted to test it out and really flesh it out before kind of shoving it out to you all. We're actually redoing the innovation system to basically have it so that we're not starting in the archaic period, or like the earliest innovation isn't the archaic period. I think, if I remember correctly, the new earliest innovation period is the classical period, and then we're gonna do a early and late Hellenistic period, and then the imperial period. Did I get that correct, Rick?
Yes, you did. Yeah.
Awesome. So we are going to be shifting the time period that we're looking at. For the time being, we're not going to have any different start dates. Essentially, by having a different start date, we have to kind of redo all the work that we've already done. We have to reestablish what the titles are for all the territories that we've implemented. And so doing a new start date would be an expansion in and of itself. And what we've decided on is that for the time being, we would rather give you a new area to play in rather than a new time period to play in. But at some point, we will probably do a new bookmark time period. When that is, we haven't figured out yet, but it's on our things to consider list. What kind of governments what government will the person be left behind to have? I'm assuming that's related to a migration. Again, very, very early rough draft idea, probably whatever government was already there in place. We might decide to create a custom like interim government for that kind of situation. But again, this is a very bare bones idea. We haven't fleshed anything out yet. We don't have a lot of those details answered yet. How much will the map in places like Ireland and Britain reflect what we only really know tribes from centuries later? Guess it's very far down the line. Yeah, so the farther we move away from the Mediterranean, the less information we're going to have. And in particular, the more we're going to have to rely on archaeological evidence, which oftentimes, we might be able to discern cultural differences, but we're not going to know what those cultures are called. So essentially, to answer your question, we're going to have to make an educated guess. again, these are semi-nomadic cultures. They tend to move around a lot. Um, we're gonna have to make guesses based on archaeological evidence. Like we know the Belgic tribes are they invade southern Britain at some point. I don't remember the exact date on that, or like the exact time period that we think it is. But we're gonna have to make educated guesses for where all these tribes are. But we're gonna definitely put in the work in researching the archaeology to figure that out. How will you handle colonies and similar dependencies? So we do want to do colonies as a mechanic. It is on our ideas board right now. I haven't read it in a long time, so I don't remember what the details are that we've already fleshed out on that. However, I think that in an ideal world, the migration mechanics and the colony mechanics would likely have the same or a similar foundation, just for ease and efficiency of fleshing out the systems. So they'll very likely work in tandem with each other or be modeled after each other. But we definitely want to implement that. And how exactly we're going to implement that, we don't have a determined answer for that yet. But it is coming soon, TM. Yeah, thanks for stopping by, Steel Rex. Appreciate it. Hope you have a good one. We add some sort of colonial independence mechanism, like if the colonies eclipse the mother city, like Carthage and the Phoenicians. Yeah, that definitely sounds awesome. I think that would be a great feature to add. Off the top of my head, I don't know how we could track something like that, but like we'd probably come up with some kind of value to track behind the scenes for determining relative power between colonies and the mother cities. Like for instance, we know in this time period, because I was just reading about it, like Syracuse ends up establishing a bunch of colonies over here. They establish a colony of Issa, and then Issa goes off to establish a bunch of her own colonies on these islands and on the coast. So being able to model that realistically and allow that to be something that players can do and the AI can recreate, I think that would definitely be a cool detail to add. So yeah, colonies, migrations, royal court, lots of exciting stuff. Those were pretty much all the notes that I had written down. Was there anything else that you wanted to add, Rick?
Not really for the new content, no. I do think it's one thing that I thought about is that it's important to work on maybe change the cultural conversion mechanics for this section. Because like we're going to be adding all of these new cultures, and it's not really that useful if CK3 you just convert the whole Balkans within 10 years. Which is that's a really big issue with like the current version of CK3 in my opinion. Everything just gets a uniform culture in 10 years.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see what, because like they're gonna have to do something with that for the royal court if they're gonna do culture mixing. What does the change culture action do? But yeah, I agree with you. I think that would be, if they don't solve that in the royal court, then we might have to take a customized approach for that. Awesome. So we talked about the expansion. Hope you all get a chance to play the update. Other things. So Royal Court is going to be published, I think it's like February 9th. We're going to take some time to play around with that, see how the systems work. We'll put out the compatibility patch as quickly as we can to let you all play the mod with Royal Court content. And then, depending on how far we've gotten with the expansion content, and then how much Royal Court is going to have to force us to redo that content, we'll be pushing out the expansion as soon as we can after that. And I can't wait to show it off. We'll definitely do. So for right now, we don't have you don't have any visuals really to show off for the expansion content that we've been doing. I know pretty much all the work that I've been doing has been research and then putting some stuff in like the back end, or like putting it into script. So there's nothing fancy to see. But as we make some new coat of arms, make some new decisions, once we get the map drawn out, like we'll be showing off a lot more cooler visual things for you all to check out. So I guess let's transition into the gift giving portion of the stream, which is going to be a game. So the way that I had figured this would go, and we're gonna find out real quickly how well of an idea this was. So I love games, obviously, playing games and modding them. So I wanted to turn this gift giving session into a bit of a game. So what I decided to do was I have some trivia questions that I'm going to post in chat, or actually I'm going to say it in the stream, and you all can post in the live stream chat what your answers are. The way we're going to do this is I'm going to say the question, and then the first person to post the correct answer is going to be able to pick what game they want. They get basically first come, first serve choice of the games that we have available as giveaways. And given how many people we have here, everybody should get at least one, hypothetically. So let me pull up the list of games that we have so you all can see what you're competing for. Let Boom, and I'm going to post that in the live stream chat so that you all can check it out for yourselves. Let me fix that. There we go. So those are all the games. Rick, would you mind assisting me? So when somebody gets the answer correct, can you give them the, and then they'll tell you what game they want to pick off the list. Can you send them the code and keep track of which games we've given away?
Yep.
Awesome. Also, everybody who gets a game, make sure you give Rickinator a big thank you. These are all being given away out of his generosity. So everyone, give him a big thanks. So we'll get this party we'll get this party started. So I decided that I wanted to reread some of Herodotus the other day, and I picked it up and I realized that I had left some bookmarks in my copy of Herodotus. And I turned to the first one, and it turned out to be one of my favorite stories ever in Herodotus. So who can tell me the name of the queen who ends up killing a very important and famous Persian emperor, cutting off his head and pouring cups of blood down his throat so that he can sate himself on his bloodlust? Can anybody tell me the name of that queen? Hey, Tomaris, you got it. Yeah, she was the queen of the Masagatai, and uh, in one version of Cyrus's death, um, he gets killed while fighting the Masagatai, and then she gets revenge because Cyrus had killed her son. So she's like, "How dare you? I'll give you your fill of blood." Um, that's one of my favorite stories. Anyway, so the next question is: can anybody name the two Roman brothers who tried to enact social reforms in Rome, um, were unsuccessful, and ended up being chased through the streets by an angry mob? And I think one of them was, I think they were both decapitated, and like one of them had their body thrown off one of the rivers in Rome, or one of the bridges in Rome. Yeah, can you give me their first names? A Tiberius and Gaius, love it. Um, as a follow up, um, can anybody tell me who their famous grandfather is? Yeah, everyone gets a game. You get a game. You get a game. So does anybody know who the famous grandfather of the Gracchi brothers are? Is. I'll give you a hint. He's a famous general, and he's famous for fighting in the South. He's not Tiberius. I'll give you another hint. His nickname comes from the part of the world that he fought in. Yeah, Scipio Africanus. Love it. Yeah, it's one of the things that I love about the Gracchi brothers is that they are, essentially these spoiled rich kids with a famous granddaddy who's running around trying to enact social reform for the lower classes and the non citizens of Rome. Really fascinating dynamic. Um, this would be a question for anybody who's paying attention to my earlier ramblings. What was the name of the leader who brought the survivors up to this area and settled the survivors of the Celtic invasion to Delphi and settled this area? What was his name? I'll give you a hint. The people who he was leading were called the Scordici, or Scordiscoi. Yeah, so I'll repeat the question. Who was the leader who brought the a group of surviving Celts from the attack on Delphi north to settle in this area, and they later called themselves the Scordiscoi, or Scordici, or Scordiski? Give it a couple more seconds, then we'll move on. All right. His name was Bathanatos, and he's hopefully going to be one of our bookmark characters for the expansion. Let's do something a little bit closer to home. Who was Alexander's famous teacher? Alexander had a famous philosophical teacher. Yeah, Aristotle. And we'll do one more, I think. What should it be? Do you have a good trivia question, Rick?
It might be an easy one.
Okay.
Who led the Persian invasion into Greece?
Oh, I know this one. So the question was, who led the Persian invasion into Greece? Yeah, which invasion?
The second more famous one.
Yeah, Xerxes. The documentary 300. A plus scholarly research right there. Awesome. So thanks for coming by to hang out with us for the stream. Hope we answered all your questions. If you have any other questions you want to ask or you think of something later, feel free to drop something in one of our channels. We'll happily talk about it. If you didn't get a game, let's make sure you walk away with something today. We appreciate you all playing our mod and making this whole endeavor really exciting for us. So thanks everybody for stopping by. And with that,